Hello, I'm Mantastic and Fantastic, and today I'm going to be talking about the two brand new Godfest exclusives, Fagan Rai and Zaerog Core. So both of these cards will be featured in subsequent Godfest, but players will be able to redeem a special exchange medal for one of these two, which they can choose. Now this medal will only appear in your mail starting on December 1st, so don't panic if you don't see it here right away. So basically, quickly summarizing the latest North American Gung-Ho stream, they announced lots of new exciting content. They are going to be giving us a total of 310 magic stones over the course of 2 months. So basically 5 magic stones per day, every day. So make sure you actually log in. But another thing I want to point out is that the Gung-Ho North American team is doing quite a good job, in my opinion, because they are providing us with more frequent and regular streams, which not only gives more excitement and kind of community involvement, but it also shows that they are trying, and content is coming over, I feel, at a bit of a faster pace. So this is nice to have. With that being said, this article here will be examining the two brand new Godfest exclusives, their various forms, as well as their weapon assists to give players a better understanding and decision-making capabilities for which one they want to redeem starting on December 1st. So the first one is Fagan, and he's an unusual card because he really does not have, his base and evolve form are kind of unusual because he only transforms into his evolved form. You can never actually evolve him outside of a dungeon. You have to be in a dungeon with him and then actually evolve him through his 22 turn active skill to create this spectacular evolved form. Unfortunately, before he actually transforms, he is truly pathetic. He has basically a 25 times 2 liters leader skill. This is like 2015 or so. You have basically no awakenings. You have no super awakenings. You have insignificant stats. You have no RCV. And that's a weapon assist, so it doesn't apply to him. So he basically has nothing going on for him. And he's just kind of a pitiful thing there. And the thing is, you want to use Fagan for his leader skill, which means both your leaders are going to be this sad unevolved form, and it becomes a matter of keeping yourself alive until you can achieve that 22 turn transformation. And that's going to often rely on skill boost, because with that type of leader skill you can't really survive much or kill much in the way of dangerous things, so you have to make sure you actually can transform them in time. In solo mode, this is going to be incredibly difficult, but in co-op, it's actually much easier because instead of having to rely on 4 cards for skill boost, you get both teams subs, so that's 4 and 4. So you have 8 cards providing skill boost, which makes it much easier to hit that 22 threshold. But once he transforms, wow, he becomes amazing. Like, he's basically like the pinnacle of pad, and it feels rewarding because you actually had to suffer or jeopardize or compromise your team compositions. So in his transformed state, his active skill is 2 turns of bypassing void damage shield effects. So he voids damage void, which means you don't need to have VDP to actually function. And this lasts for 2 turns, which is nice because many things later on tend to have VDP back to back to back, especially in the higher tier arenas. So being able to bypass that on a 10 turn cooldown is meaningful. With that being said, I want to stress that this active skill has no secondary effect, which does lower the cooldown, but also means you are unable to actually utilize it if the spawn in question does not have the damage void mechanic. Kind of like how Lu was only able to be used against damage absorption spawns, Fagan must only be used against void spawns. So you have to be kind of careful with this active skill. You can't dump it prematurely, and you have to make sure your inherit doesn't charge up if you're actually relying on the damage void aspect. Moving forward to their leader skill, they have an unconditional, I want to stress unconditional, 4 times health, 4 times recovery for dragon type cards, and 400 times damage. Unconditional. As long as you're a dragon, you get all of those. One combo, doesn't matter which color, 400 times damage. That's kind of ridiculous. And the only true drawback, so to speak, is no innate damage reduction, which makes it so gravity plus hits can be a little more dangerous. But hey, with a leader skill as impressive as that, that's amazing. But the fun doesn't stop there. He also gains the ability to have follow-up damage of 50,000 when matching 5 or more colors. So if you have full rainbow activation, you have follow-up damage, which means you can ignore resolve spawns, which lowers the dependency on having heart orbs present. Of course, there will be times where you won't have all 5 colors, and having a follow-up attack on your team just naturally occurring will be beneficial, because there will be times where you want to kill the spawn, but you have to overcome the resolve, and you might just make the column of hearts. There are options. You have basically with him, you can ignore voids, you can ignore resolve, and you basically just one combo your way through a void spawn without making a, well, you have to actually make colors alongside it, but you don't have to match that 3x3 box. So the type of orb changers you need are very different by comparison. So this is, in my opinion, quite exciting. Furthermore, their awakenings are full bind immunity. They have 4 7 combos, so 16 times personal damage, and they also have 2 time extends. 2 big time extends. So you have 2 seconds of orb movement time, 4 of dual leaders, 16 times personal damage, and you have real weighted stats. You have 1400 basically with a high emphasis on health, solid attack, and reasonable recovery. So he's basically kind of the all-in-one package. And that high personal damage is unfortunately kind of lost in the sense that you have to, I'm sorry, it's not lost, but like you have to make sure you actually utilize their active skill to overcome voids, because generally speaking, cards with many damage awakenings want to have VDP to ensure it doesn't go to waste. With his active, it kind of solves that problem, but just be aware you have to make sure that active is ready when necessary, because you are most likely not going to be running any VDP cards or even heavy orb changes, because you need to kind of have that rainbow board activation to have that built-in fall of attack damage. With that being said, you can use minimal combos with a fall of attack and still actually sweep a spawn. Regardless of all that, he is an incredibly strong leader, but the problem is he has low applications outside of this leadership form, like leader role. As a sub, you need to wait 22 turns to transform. He provides nothing until that time. Can't really do it. You're not going to use him as a sub on his own team because then you won't have enough skill boost, and that's truly unnecessary. You already have 2 leaders. That's more than enough of these void damage voids, so it is problematic. You need 5 colors for follow-up damage. Shouldn't be too big of a deal. Remember, you have 400 times damage with 1 combo, so 1 combo plus a column of hearts should be possibly enough to actually kill a resolve spawn. Like, it is nice, but just something to keep in mind that rainbow activation is technically required for that follow-up damage. He only can use machine or healer killer latents, which is less ideal, so to speak. Those are the less desirable or less common dangerous spawns. And he has no limit break, he has no super awakening, so like his stats are still okay, but just be aware he does technically have a little less awakenings. It's not that big of a deal. But the main crux of utilizing him is having enough skill boosts and being able to activate him in time. So what I like to do when trying to build teams is actually use Illumina.com's fuzzy search, and it allows me to basically filter out specific monsters for specific awakenings, typings, or active skill components that I find exciting. So in this case here, if you click that link through my website, it'll take you to Illumina.com and it will show you dragon cards with 4 or more skill boosts. There are some out there, and this is a great website, and it has all the information updated for North American cards. With that being said, things that have been updated in Japan through various buffs or whatever won't necessarily reflect that. So something like Riku and Dolk, who will have 5 skill boosts at some point in time, won't necessarily show up there. But the point of the matter is you need to find a way to get that 22. But I want to give a special emphasis to Riku because they provide a single jammer, poison, and blind resist. So it's a nice 20% rolled into a 5 skill boost card. Their board changer gives you the full color, so you have that resolve killing aspect, and also a skill charge. If you had full rainbow color coverage, you can charge Riku up even faster. Another interesting card I want to mention is that because you have 400 times unconditionally, TPA cards can actually provide meaningful amounts of damage, and most notably is Roach. So Roach has only 1 skill boost, but she has by far the most damage output potential from a TPA match. And that is truly spectacular because you could 1 combo your way to victory. Now you obviously want to supplement her damage with most likely Zaerog Core's Weapon Assist, which provides 2 additional TPAs, get a Super Awakening TPA, basically just stack TPAs into Oblivion, and then she just 1 combos, things die. Kind of interesting to keep in mind, but again, that 1 skill boost will be difficult to manage because, well, think about it. If you're playing solo, you need to find a way to get 21 more skill boosts from 3 subs and possibly leader weapon assist. Like, it's just going to be much more difficult by comparison. But just keep that in mind. This is going to be wonderful because the thing is, you don't need rows, you don't need blobs, you don't need VDP, so TPA definitely has much more value. And the main reason why TPA is kind of a lacking damage awakening is because the meta right now is kind of dominated by blob style leaders who like to rely on their primary color and have to match, say, 6 connected orbs of that color to deal damage, which often leaves not enough left over for a TPA, and you're better served with just passive damage like Rose or Orb Enhances. So TPAs can definitely shine bright on Fagan teams. With that being said, his weapon assist is actually quite powerful as well. It provides you with 2 team healths, a single skill boost, a cloud resist. It's a lot of interesting things wrapped up in one. Furthermore, it's a 20-turn cooldown, which helps prevent it accidentally charging up, and the active itself is actually not bad. 4 turns of +2 combo count. pretty useful. So it's kind of combining multiple elements at the same time. So this could be potentially the first cloud resist many players have. It could also be the very first skill boost weapon assist players have. So this definitely does provide value. Could be a nice little stepping stone, so to speak. Furthermore, those team healths are kind of free, quote unquote, because you're already pursuing most likely the cloud for like harder level content. And you get the skill boost so things come up a little faster, which is nice. But the team health definitely has merits because when you're pushing through the hardest level of content, you're trying to min-max your team as much as possible. And for example, there are many teams out there, Tifa teams tend to have lower amounts of effective health just because most of it's shifted into RCV, and then you obviously have strong offensive capabilities. So this double team health could make a difference for you surviving certain preemptives or certain damage check thresholds that may have been impossible to survive otherwise. For example, the latent Tamadras in Altarena 3 hit for spectacularly high amounts of damage, but it's possible to survive it with enough health, and if you use Diao Chan, or if you use Diao Chan for light damage reduction. So the point of the matter is, it possibly gives an option to survive hits that you could not have done so beforehand, and it makes it quite powerful overall. And the lengthy 20-turn cooldown is a big step up from other skill boost weapons because something like Amen only gives you 7 turns to play around and will most likely accidentally charge up, which you don't want. Whereas this active, if it does charge up, it's not the worst thing in the world, but again, just the bigger margin or window for utilizing your base active skill is important. Now, on the flip side, Zaerog Core is a completely different card by comparison, and all 3 of his forms have different merits and value, and he does not have this transformation ability, and because of this, it makes him a little more universally accessible because it's not as hard to truly take advantage of him. So in his base form, you reduce your health by 50%, and then for 1 turn, increase orb movement time by 3 seconds. So it's a 1-turn self-nuke, and this is incredibly valuable for teams that rely on being low health to deal damage. Cards with this attack while below 50% awakening love this, so team compositions would most likely run Zaerog Core as a key sub if they have this type of leader skill mechanic. Now, even if he is off color, even if he is the wrong typing, he still provides meaningful stats. He does have sizable amounts of personal damage still, and even though we do have the Samurai Showdown cartridge, Zaerog Core is just an infinitely better option, and the orb movement time bonus can override debuffs, and it's just quite a valuable active skill overall. I'll talk about it in a bit more detail as well when I discuss him as a sub, but in terms of his leader skill, it's also quite formidable. You have 4 times health and 324 times attack when you match 2 or more dart combos for dragon type cards. Furthermore, you also have 43.75% damage reduction when below 80%. So you are deceptively tanky, and this is quite powerful because this damage reduction activates at a much higher threshold compared to other leader skills that have a similar mechanic. Instead of having that 50% threshold like Light Yusuke, you have an 80%, much easier to work around, and that actually boosts your effective health to significantly higher amounts. When you're full health, you most likely can survive any preemptive in the game. When you get some damage, if you're at say like 70% health, you can tank any gravity plus hits. You're not going to really die. So you are deceptively tanky, which is definitely important. With that being said, you have to find some way to solve your RCV, as well as the fact that you want to only utilize dark-based dragons, which does definitely constrict your sub-pool availability. On the other hand, he does still come with reasonable weighted stats, a reasonable distribution as well, and the biggest draw is going to be his personal damage. He has double 7 combo along with 2 attack while below 50% awakenings. This translates into 16 times personal damage against any spawn. That's the same as Fagan after he transforms. It's the same as Ranger Slayer, but the key is you don't have to wait for the transformation, and it's effective against every spawn, unlike killers. Furthermore, he can gain a VDP Super Awakening, so that damage does not go to waste. Like I've said it before, cards with heavier emphasis on damage awakenings want to have VDP to really take advantage of it, otherwise they're being wasted. And Zaerog Core does that. Furthermore, he provides a follow-up attack with their base awakenings. So he's providing a solution to so many different problems all in one card, and that is quite amazing. Furthermore, that 1-turn active skill can easily inherit an active of your choice. So, discussing his sub potential, obviously it has synergy on teams who want to be low health, but if you can still actually utilize Zaerog for teams that don't rely on being low health, because even without the attack while below 50%, he still has double 7 combo and VDP with a follow attack. That's actually pretty good. And that 1 turn cooldown is actually meaningful because you can inherit something like a damage absorb void, something that you're going to need to have in the dungeon, most likely at an earlier time because of the 1 turn cooldown, so it's easier to have that inherit charge up. You can utilize that key inherit, and now you have this interesting active skill that can override time debuffs, which definitely is meaningful, but when you actually utilize his active skill, it provides that 50% health cut, which will always put you below half health, which means he suddenly just taps into all of his awakenings, and now he gains basically a burst of 4 times personal damage. So now he has 16 times personal damage, can stack with VDP, and he can deal excessively large amounts of damage. This is definitely quite exciting. Like, you have more applications. He doesn't just have to only be used on teams that want to be below low health. He can be utilized on a wider variety of teams. Now, looking at this leader skill, I've already mentioned that his effective health is wonderfully high. It has a very solid attack multiplier, and he only has to match 2+ dark combos, so 6 dark orbs in total, which sounds reasonable, but is actually a bit harder than you may think. So even though he has the same orb requirement as other popular leaders such as Ina, who needs to match 6 connected dark orbs, the 2 separate dark combos is actually a drawback. Because even though you preserve your combo count, if you have to make a VDP, which is quite often, you will need to have 9 for the VDP plus an additional 3, which could place some more restrictions on the type of actors you bring to the dungeon. You might need more orb changes, you might need more Skyfall buffs. It might just be a little bit harder to VDP if from a natural board. And that definitely is a bit of a drawback, whereas something like Ina can fully activate from a connected 9 in a 3x3 box. So that does give her a distinct advantage. Of course, there are obviously solutions to solve this leader's skill requirements. Firstly, his personal damage with dual leaders is probably going to be more than enough to handle really any damage checks in the dungeon. Like, for my Tifa and Halmoru team, my Bradamante and Halloween Cotton are basically the only cards that do truly meaningful damage, and I'm okay with that. Like, I still get by because I can supplement damage from other ways, and I want to take that same logic and apply it to Zaerog Core because, well, he has that massive offensive prowess potential. So supplementing him with like orb enhances can be meaningful, which means something like Nergigante with 3 enhanced dark orbs can be quite powerful. Furthermore, that active is strong. It creates a column of hearts, column of dark, Skyfalls of dark for 4 turns, and 2 Nergigantes can almost create a permanent Skyfall buff, which is much stronger than Hiei's. It's 15, not 7 or 8%. It's quite a bit higher. And every orb that falls down will become enhanced. So again, it just makes Zaerog Core do even more damage than he did beforehand. Another thing you could do to help alleviate this orb hungriness is actually utilize 7x6 leader swapping. Now, for the most part, 7x6 leader swapping has not been too popular of a thing, mostly because most leaders already come with a suitable kit that works fine on 6x5, and it's just another active skill that's kind of wasted, so to speak, and it may be difficult to charge up. It's just not going to be providing enough merits and benefits. But for Zaerog Core, there is that possibility because you have a 1-turn base cooldown. So Zaerog Core inherits a leader swap. It's much easier to actually have ready in time. Now, there are several different 7x6 leaders you can use. Like, you could technically use Diao Chan with 4 skill boosts, but I don't like her as much, mostly because she's light, so it's off color. It's just not as ideal. But something like Uruka might be more luxurious, but also possibly more valuable, so to speak. And the reason being is you get that larger board, and as long as you have a fire card, because Nergigante is your wood, Uruka is your water, you have all the colors covered for her leader skill, and it's a strong leader skill for a 7x6. You have some health, you could have damage reduction, you could have RCD, it depends on the form you choose, but both Urukas, regardless of the form you choose, will have the same powerful damage absorption void active skill, which you actually want to bring anyways. So let's say you chose blue Uruka. You could have 777 combo on her, so she does still do reasonable amounts of damage even with her sub attribute. Obviously, if you match blue, it does more. But the point of the matter is you have an active skill you actually want to bring. A Fujin-style active skill is something you almost need to have nowadays. So it's already solved there, provides solid multipliers. And if you have Uruka as a leader, your 2 Nergigantes with 4 to 8 skill boosts, and your 2 Zaerog Cores, assuming they chose VDP as a Super Awakening, is up to 12 skill boosts, assuming Nergigantes got both their Super Awakenings that way, and a bit more with your Fire sub. So it's not enough to charge the leader swap immediately, But Uruka still is a strong leader skill, and even for the earlier floors of arenas, you should be still fine. Like, Zaerog Core provides a massive amount of effective health, Uruka provides some, you should be fine. And then you swap, and then you suddenly have this fully unleashed dragon dealing massive amounts of damage to whatever stands in his way. I have also included in my website article a link to Dark Fire Dragons through Ilmina, because it's such a useful website. Next comes Zaerog Core's Evolved Form. So for their Evolved Form, their active skill bypasses damage absorb shield effects for 1 turn, unlocks all orbs, changes the board to fire, water, wood, light, and dark. So basically like a light Kali style board changer, all 5 colors, no hearts, damage, absorption, void, and they naturally come with a skill charge. That is pretty nice. And this also could be potentially the very first Fujin style active skill many players actually have in their monster box. And this is an important thing because without this type of active skill, many things can't really be cleared because damage control doesn't really exist and we just deal too much damage. So this can be one of the most valuable solutions for a more developing monster box. Furthermore, because their active skills don't have any skill up requirements, you can swap between these forms freely and the evolution material costs are relatively insignificant. So let's say you're a newer player, you chose Zaerog Core as your decision, you make his evolve form, you benefit from this Fujin style active skill, you're happy, and over time you get more and more, and you're like, well, it's not as unique, it's not as useful, I'll just switch him back to his base form. And then suddenly you've got this powerhouse damaging card, which probably has more synergy with more developed monster boxes. So he creates a nice stepping stone of like, you have a nice introductory leader, and then introductory card slash leader, and then bam, you have a much more stronger endgame leader slash sub. In terms of their leader skill, they are basically like an upgraded Edward, except that they only can use dragon types, which is much more restrictive by comparison. You have to be above 50% health to tap into that damage reduction, but at least you do have flat health, which does make it a little easier to stay above. Their awakenings are bind immunities. They have 3 skill boosts and a VDP, skill charge, and the TPAs. So it's okay. Like I mentioned, TPAs do have a bit of issues, but at least Zaerog Core has a very respectable amount of base attack. It's just a matter of finding a way to truly take advantage of it. With that being said, you could technically get 5 skill boosts, which could be meaningful for Fagan Rai teams, because when you think about it, a dragon with 5 skill boosts is kind of rare. Zaerog Core has good stats, good awakenings, he can make a very good sub. Of course, that means you have to have both of them, but hey, it's just something to keep in the back of your mind. And this Fujin style active skill does charge up faster if you're able to incorporate skill charge into it, so that is something to keep in mind. But for the most part, I honestly feel like this is more of a transitional card, so to speak. It's great for players who lack this Fujin style active skill, or for those who really want those skill boosts for Fagan Rai, but outside of that, I feel like his evolve form is less universally helpful and powerful, especially for more developed monster boxes, and that's okay because we can switch it. But in the meantime, if I were to get Zaerog Core, I would just stick with their base form for myself. In terms of their weapon assist, well, I should mention their leader skills. So their leader skill is kind of like Edward, but you must utilize dragons. So the idea is you have to be above 50% health for your damage reduction and your full attack multiplier. That is problematic because if you are below half health, you have to heal up before you match orbs. Otherwise, you don't tap into that damage multiplier, which means you can get stuck in this loop of you heal back up, take a hit, go back down, and then you're in a problematic spot. Obviously, with this 2.25 times health, it makes a bigger window compared to Edward, but the point of the matter is multi-hits can shred you very quickly, and it can get stuck into a problematic loop where you just don't have a way to heal yourself necessarily, and you just feel kind of awkward. And that's the main reason why these types of leader skills are having some issues nowadays. In regards to their weapon assist, they provide 6 times attack for dragon types. Wow, that's excessive and probably unnecessary. The main appeal is the double TPA. So, I've mentioned already that TPA struggles, but if you throw this weapon assist on something who already has many TPAs and strong base attack, like Super Reincarnate Haku or Roach, you can propel their already formidable TPA damage to new heights. It can deal spectacular amounts of damage. Of course, this is relatively niche and specific. Not every player can really take advantage of this, and furthermore, it's just not going to be as applicable for the average player. But of that being said, this is the highest form of non-killer damage we can contribute through a weapon assist, which is definitely meaningful in itself. Of course, TPAs do struggle with the blob meta. It tends to make rows, you tend to make VDPs, there may not be enough orbs left over. It only helps the owning card, but again, TPAs do have benefits on Fagan Rai teams because, well, you don't need to actually have those VDPs, you don't match rows, that sort of idea. So, Taking all of those above points into consideration, I have concocted this somewhat brief selection guide. Use this as just kind of like a quick summary, as well as maybe a starting point. Don't take these as absolute truths. So you should pick Fagan Rai. The reasons why you would want to pick them is you have a dedicated account to co-op with yourself, because the hardest issue is actually making him charge up. If you can get him to transform, amazing. If you can't get him to transform, problematic. And that's why co-op becomes so important for this card. If you have an alternate account and you play for yourself on a regular basis, both accounts can pick him, and now you have a very strong leader because you will have a much easier time meeting that skill boost requirement. Conversely, if you can have him charge up in solo mode, more power to you. You probably have a very deep and very developed monster box. On the other hand, if you are drawn to this weapon assist, it can be meaningful because it could be your first cloud, could be your first skill boost, provides quite a bit of value in terms of the longer cooldown and the double team health. With that being said, the main appeal should be for transformation, and that's the main reason why you should not pick him if you are unable to have a dedicated co-op partner, you can't charge it up yourself in solo mode, and the weapon assist has not enough value for you. By comparison, Zaerog Core should be selected if you're in need of a very powerful dark sub. They have so much personal damage, especially if you like to utilize that attack while below 50% awakening. He only really falls short, you're like number 2, of Ranger Slayer for universal personal damage. That's a meaningful thing to have. Like, he is a very powerful card for that reason, and he's quite flexible. You can use him on teams that want to be below 50% health. You can use him on teams who don't need to be. He just can be used in so many different ways and applications. Furthermore, his leader skill is actually not a bad one either. If you have a way to populate your team with Dark Dragons, you have those Nergigantes, you could make a reasonably strong team for himself. On the other hand, his Evolve Form could be your very first Fujin-style active skill, which in itself is invaluable. I went without a Fujin for like a year plus, I think, and it was annoying, and nowadays I can't really imagine not having a Fujin-style active skill because everything nowadays needs it, and that is problematic. It is definitely one drawback of the game, so this could be your very first source. And remember, you can reverse his evolution should this active skill no longer be needed as you progress and play this game for longer periods of time. Finally, that TPA weapon assist is obviously quite luxurious. It has very specific but very powerful applications, and you need to determine whether or not that is actually of use for yourself. You should not pick Zaerog Core. Well, I would actually pick Zaerog Core in the vast majority of times, just because he's more universally accessible, more universally available. And the only time you really wouldn't want to pick him necessarily is because you have a way to tap into Fagan Rai's transformation ability. And if you can, you do unlock an incredibly powerful leader, but again, it is quite difficult to do so. And for myself, who I personally plan to pick, I actually prefer Zaerog Core, mostly because I have no way to transform Fagan in solo mode, and even though I do own a very developed alternate account, I actually seldom play with myself, and even then, I don't really feel a desire to actually utilize Fagan for his leader skill. I feel like having a tremendously powerful sub, especially with such strong flexibilities, will have more meaning for my monster box, because I can technically clear everything into the game, and it's a matter of just having more options available for myself. So in conclusion, both Fagan and Zaerog are exciting new Godfest exclusives, and the fact that we can acquire one of them for free makes it even more exciting because everyone can participate in this joyous and powerful event. Furthermore, this medal, which you receive on December 1st, will have no expiration date, so you can hold on to it if you are in a bit of a limbo for which decision you want to make. And with that being said, let me know what you think about these new cards in the comments below, along with which one you actually plan on monster exchanging for. Hopefully you'll have a fantastic day. I wish you all the best luck in your own pad adventures, and happy puzzling.